Welcome back to The Line. Political hit job or legislative end around. The accusations are flying once again this week over what to do about New Mexico's reading proficiency problem. Now, Governor Martinez has long pushed for legislation that would require students to be held back if they aren't reading at grade level, but the legislature has always balked at that idea. Well, now the Department of Ed is trying a different approach, proposing a rule change that calls for early intervention to help children that are struggling with reading, but it would also require students to be held back, quote, in some situations if they don't score well enough on an end-of-year test. The plan isn't sitting well with some members of the Legislative Education Study Committee who think the governor and PED are going around the legislature on this plan. And Sophie, let's start with that first bit there, the going around bit. True? Is that an accurate accusation from the legislative folks?
Of course it is. Mm-hmm. Of course it is.
This is what people do. That's right.
This is essentially the legislation that the governor has tried to get through the legislature every year and has failed. And so I think it's a creative attempt by the PED, Public Education Department, to get this priority through. I will say I think it is going to end up in the delightfully geeky area, at least for me, of the courts.
Yes.
At some point, this issue of whether statute precludes using the rulemaking procedure in this way, that's going to get sorted out. But here's what the governor...
What's your sense of that, by the way? I know it's early days, but...
I think, very much as the recent decision from the Supreme Court over whether the veto power was used correctly last year. I mean, I think it's going to end up before the courts. It's hard to predict exactly where it will go, but I am hearing that there's some discussion that there may be a lack. I'm not putting this well, but I think there is an argument to be made on both sides. Let's put it that way. I think there's interesting stuff that could come there. But what the governor gets is the ability in the future to say, and we made it happen, even if it was then stopped by the courts. And
that's right.
One thing I'm going to editorialize very briefly. Please. Not that it's not all editorial for me this evening, but am I the only one who's tired of state employees working in public information, state public relations folks, using that platform to say things like political hit job?
Yes.
I think you work for the state. I'd like to see something more nuanced. You are supposed to be working for the people, not for a party.
It's a reasonable discussion. Both sides are happening.
That's all I got to say about that. I'm tired of it.
That works out well. Andy, if you think about it, the state, what they're trying to do with PED is just say, look, we have an intervention plan, we have development plans, we have all these plans to help students, which was really kind of interesting in the language once you read the whole situation. It's not as if it's just about the PARCC test. Did they make a good enough case here? Because the folks who think it's just about the PARCC test, like all this work comes down to your efforts, meaning the student, at the end of the year, it could be other factors at play there. It's
I think... going back to kind of what you talked to Sophie about was that this comes down to a big question of what is supposed to be in statute and what is supposed to be in the rulemaking. And
that's right.
I think people argue both sides depending on what it is. I mean, people have argued that our current Secretary of State, Maggie Toulouse-Oliver, shouldn't be able to change things in rules. The same governor argued that the expansion of the medical cannabis program should not be in statute, it should be in rules. And so I think it's kind of an opportunistic type thing, and I don't think she's going to be the first. She's not the first or last person to be in this situation to try to say we're going to push this through. I'm a little bit surprised that they haven't tried to do this before. Honestly.
Someone else mentioned that to me too. This seems like 3 years ago that would have been tried, and can't keep going at it. Tom, in the broadest sense on stuff, and I realize you've got some stuff with your company that is involved with education, so we're going to talk about this in the broadest sense. But I've always wondered why we can't have these two camps come together, meaning folks in the Martinez camp who believe in retention, who believe in, tracking students all the way through, and those that want more money for early childhood education. Somehow we can't sit down and mash these kind of things together and come up with a plan for New Mexico, because they have their side here. I mean, we've got the amount of failure we have at reading grade level here. It's hard to argue where they're coming from here. But on the other side of it, we need some more help at an earlier age, don't we? So.
Yeah, and Dan McKay with the Albuquerque Journal, I think, did a really solid piece, just kind of laying out that issue as far as all the different initiatives, before the LASC. And so, I think those opportunities provide organizations a chance to come together and find that common ground. And I think that finding that common ground in an era where you have, either you're in favor of administration or you're in favor of, teachers, type stuff. There's too much divide. I think, to really kind of make much of a measurable change, which is why I think we see the governor, using a playbook that has been used by previous governors, even previous United States presidents, to make rule changes if they can't get a piece of legislation.
That's right. That's right. Exactly right. Christine, we've got 3 out of 4 fourth graders in our state not reading at a proficiency level.
Oh, it's
they can't sit there and do nothing. You know what I mean?
Right. Oh,
Can we blame these people for trying to find something
Well,
here?
there are a lot of initiatives, and people are perhaps talking past each other, but the philosophical divisions and party divisions are that we have a fight over authority and control.
Okay.
And the legislature and the executive are in this battle. But I want to interject what a principal told me would be site-based management and implementation of new programs and how to more effectively address the student body at particular schools.
Right.
It just seems to me that teachers and principals and parents kind of get short shrift, that they get left out of this equation. And really, I think that teachers are not seen, are not embraced as the experts that they are. And so I would like to see them also factored into the equation. Look at what we're witnessing nationally now. These protests and these strikes by public school teachers to say it's not just our salaries. We need more resources overall to do a number of things. And I would add that in terms of funding, last I checked, that lawsuit against the state of New Mexico waged by the Mexican American Legal Defense and Education Fund and New Mexico's Law on Poverty, Center on Law and Poverty, among some other organizations, are saying this is a major lack of funding. It has preceded the Martinez administration.
That's right.
Something major has got to change. And so there are a lot of highways leading to this, maybe a roundabout circle, trying to figure out how to intervene. But I agree that there is some common ground in terms of saying, hey, we need intervention.
Right.
It's a question of asking experts, however you define it. We have a UNM College of Education that should be weighing in much more, at least obviously. We don't see where that is, but we've got experts in this state, including the teachers, principals, and parents.
That's right. That's right. Sophie, one of the little things here that's interesting and could be read as a compromise is the parents could opt to not agree to have their student held back if they're not performing
for 1 year.
For 1 year, exactly
For
right.
1 year.
What's the danger here? Any landmines do you see? Because a lot of parents would just straight out opt for that because they're afraid of the social stigma.
Like, let's keep my kid
Right, they want to protect their kid. You know what I mean? That's a difficult decision for a parent.
You know, I think it's a good question. I'm not sure, though, that option of keeping your kid going is, I'm not sure that that's that big a deal. I think it's like, I hate to say it, but I think let's give something to the parents.
Right.
In the hopes that we can kind of quiet that argument there on that level.
But in its practical application, it's hard to predict for any family, but that's a difficult one. Because what if they choose not to have the child held back? It's still not working. Then you've got a whole other thing. Their APS can decide what's going to happen at that point. The parent's sort of out of the equation.
Right. I mean, what you hope, and I would expect for
well, not just APS, statewide. Sorry.
Right. Most, if not all, parents, is that they would look at the situation with their child and they would say, yeah, you know what, we do think that there's intervention that needs to happen here.
Right.
And then look at whether is it appropriate to hold the kid back to try to get additional help, which may be difficult within the school systems, given the resources that are there. You know, I think holding a kid back is only one of a number of possibilities.
Right.
And I think one of the longstanding concerns about this particular program is if you hold a kid back, especially if you hold them back multiple times, and you're not providing the resources that would allow them to move forward, you're creating situations in which much older children are in a classroom with much younger children, and that creates negative impacts in the educational, in the learning environment in the classroom.
That's right. You know, one of the goals, we're going to wrap this up, but one of the goals is also to potentially hold back 8th graders, guys, and that's a tricky one, let alone 3rd graders. Now you're talking about real social stuff at that point. And the science is sort of loose on whether that actually sends a kid into a tailspin or that they never really recover from, or actually sets them on the right track for college. So that's a tricky one, that 8th grade level there. That's a tough one. I have to wrap that up. The Department of Ed, by the way, will hold a public hearing on this proposed reading retention rule changes on the morning of May 17th. So for more information, just head to our website at newmexicoinfocus.org.